Okay, good afternoon everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about how to build a mass notification service for disaster recovery. So I'm going to start with just some housekeeping to get us kicked off. So we are scheduled for 30 minutes today. I do like to try and keep a tight ship for this. So that does include some time for any Q&A at the end. If for any reason we don't manage to get through to everyone's questions, we'll keep track of all of them, and I do promise that we shall get back to everyone individually, or if we've got anything that's of interest for the group, we shall share with everyone. And if you need that, that's over on the right-hand side, so you should see the tab for questions. So just pop those in there. It's just myself here today, so I won't be answering any questions as we're going through the session, but I'll try to get through as many as possible at the end. And then to answer, hopefully, what is everyone's first question usually, slides will be made available at the end of this session. We're also recording this webinar, so don't feel as if you need to furiously scribble down any notes. And additionally, you should see on the right-hand side in your GoToWebinar tab, a handout. So we actually have a PDF, which is all the directions of what we're talking about here today, of how to build the mass notification service. So that's the bulk of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be doing a step-by-step guide of how you can build this service using only free or freemium tools. We're also going to look at any further custom development that you might choose to do afterwards for that, because I think what's interesting here, and I'm going to get onto in a second, the tool that we're going to run you through is a really basic, it's a real sort of starters mass notification service, but there's plenty of things that we can use to take from it and build from it. And then before we get into the bulk of that, I'm actually going to look at what do I as a business need from a mass notification service, and then try to work out where it is that we sit on this continuum of functionality from something really basic to an enterprise level tool. And so starting with here, I'm going to ask the question of what is a mass notification service, and so you might be using two different terms for this. We could be referring to a mass notification service or an emergency notification service, and fundamentally it's just that. It's a tool that you use to communicate at scale with a lot of people. Now they can be internally, they can be your staff, or it could be externally, it could be your suppliers, customers, and anyone else. And then one of the things that's really important about this is that it's separate from any normal communications that you might have, ultimately, so that whatever communication that is isn't affected by any disaster that may have befallen anything that you're going through currently. Now there is a question here, as we all expand our use of cloud services, if we're potentially using something like an Office 365 for email and a Slack for collaboration, are we able to make do just using some of those tools? And we're going to touch on that in a little while. But before we jump into this, I think I want to address why it is that we're looking at this, and why it is that we've put together this guide and ultimately this webinar. And that is that we as Data Barracks, we work predominantly with medium-sized businesses here in the UK. So not folks like the Barclays with the tens of thousands of employees and really mature business continuity functions, but not John the landscape gardener who has just a couple of members of staff. It's medium-sized businesses who have hundreds or perhaps thousands of staff, and they have all of these challenges of the big businesses of their business continuity functions, but they don't necessarily have the resources to be able to deal with that. So of all of the businesses that we work with, it is very rare that we would ever speak to someone who has a mass communication service in place. So we thought, right, what are the ways that you can put something in place? And ultimately, the reason that they don't have something in place is one of two things. It's either a lack of money, or it's a lack of time to invest, ultimately both a resource. So the ultimate aim here is, how do we produce something that is low in cost, but also that you can produce using free or freemium tools without the need for any additional development help, and get something that will get you from nowhere to somewhere pretty quickly. Now before I guess we jump into where we are as a business and what we might need, I want to start with taking this a step back and say, as a consumer in our private lives, how do we communicate at scale generally, and you look at the types of occasions we might be doing this for. Perhaps you're organising a birthday party or a wedding, or you're going on a holiday with extended family, and you need to speak to a number of people. What's the method that you would use for that? If we're talking about a wedding, that might be a letter. It's something you don't necessarily need an immediate response to. It's something that's a little more formal. For everything else, you're probably using something like you're sending an email to everyone, or it's a group SMS, or perhaps you're using one of the OTT services like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. And all of these things work. Now, interestingly, I've got a link at the end of this, at the end of the slides here, to a business that does use WhatsApp as its mass notification service. Completely possible for you to do that. Become slightly more difficult for larger businesses to be able to get everyone to buy in, because there are certain things that you need to have agreed, such as notifications. But these are the considerations. So as we all know, if you're trying to organize anything and you're sending out a large mass email, you get the problem of someone accidentally or intentionally replying all, which can muddy the communication lines. You have problems with having everyone's correct contact information, and you have problems with the way that people use different communications mediums. So to use an example, something a little more informal, I have a group of old friends who all work in London, and every few months we try to arrange to meet up to go for dinner and have some drinks. Now, if we do that over email, we usually do it just infrequently enough that one of the people has moved jobs, so we struggle to get hold of someone. And occasionally we might do that over something like a WhatsApp group message, and usually a number of people that's absolutely fine for, but there are some people who use those methods slightly differently. They won't have their notifications enabled, and they'll completely miss this. Ultimately, where I want to get to here is, if I need to communicate with someone privately and I need it to be immediate, there are two methods I would ever use. The first is to call them directly, and the second is to send an SMS text message. But moving away from us personally, let's look at what businesses use. So we're going to start at the low end, and then we're going to look at big businesses. So if you're a very small business, traditionally your method of emergency notification would be to use a call tree. Now, whether you've got that formally documented or not, if you're a really small business, in this case with 9 members of staff, it will probably follow your simple hierarchical lines, but it runs like this. The first person contacts 2 people, they then contact their team, everyone's notified of the problem. Throughout the course of a disruption, that can be a bit cumbersome. You don't want to have to go through this process every hour, as can be the case, to update people on what's going on. So usually the next step on from that is to distribute, an example here we have of some contact cards, and what that tells everyone is you can have a simple telephone number with a recorded message, and you can simply update that message throughout the disruption. So to kick off, we need to go through the call tree where everyone is told there is an incident that's going on. Please stand by. Please dial into the emergency contact number and do that at a period of once per hour. It will be updated. You'll be notified of how we're progressing, and then ultimately when the incident is over and it's okay to come back to the office. Now, that doesn't scale particularly well. You only need to have a few more people in this call tree here, and immediately you get some problems. Firstly, if there's too many levels of that hierarchy, there's a really strong possibility for inconsistency of messages. You can have a Chinese whispers situation where the actual message is muddled, and equally, if we lose someone at an important part of that contact tree, you can have major portions of the business that aren't notified. So this is the small business solution. What about a big business? So if you're a really large enterprise, you need a proper enterprise mass notification tool, and there's lots of these. It's a mature market. There's plenty of really good tools, and they'll all have some really mature features, things like complex management of teams, so you can include different locations and departments. You'll be able to communicate through multiple channels. You can have audit trail for confirmation of delivery and receipt. You can make sure that individual users can confirm that receipt. Now, If you're interested in looking at any of those tools, I'd suggest take a look at a couple of places. The first is CIR magazine annually produces a report on this software. I've got a link there, and it's at the end of this. We'll send that out. Take a look at that report. They assess all of the software by features, and the other place that would be good to go is BCI World. So I guess it's probably one of the largest business continuity events in the world, and it's held annually in November in London. And there you can, as I have done in previous years, you can pop down and meet with Everbridge and SendWord Now and interesting new guys like Cormy and see what it is that they're doing for a proper tool. So now, I'm assuming that everyone who is attending this webinar sits somewhere in between those two ends of the spectrum. So you probably need something a bit more sophisticated than a simple call tree, but at the same time, you perhaps don't need a really sophisticated tool with all the bells and whistles. So I want to say, what are the things that you need from your mass notification strategy? Because the strategy should obviously come before your tool. There's a couple of things to think about here. So what do you need to communicate well? So your communication needs to be relevant and consistent, and then there are a couple of considerations here. So how many different messages do you need to deliver? What kind of communication is going to be needed to be delivered throughout that incident? And then ultimately, what's the consequence of failure? So you might find that actually perhaps you're a smaller business, but you have multiple different stakeholders that need really detailed information throughout, which perhaps pushes you closer to that enterprise end. Or perhaps you're a larger business, but you've got a much more simple need. And the reason I highlight the consequence of failure, I mean, if we're talking about a small business, getting your communication wrong throughout the disruption has a relatively small consequence for you. As you grow, there's some pretty significant problems that you can have here. So you can have confusion amongst your emergency management team who are dealing with that disruption, which will delay the actual recovery. You can have problems with communicating with suppliers. You can have fallout with the press. Ultimately, obviously, that is much more significant. And I want to take a look at two scenarios and just try to highlight why it is that we're so hot on communication throughout the disruption. If you can have two situations, the first is you have a disaster and your recovery goes relatively well, but your communication with everyone is really bad. How do you feel about that versus a recovery where the process isn't particularly good, but throughout everyone is well notified and all of your communication is really effective? Now, I personally would always favor the latter of those two because I think it's something that certainly throughout that disruption feels better, and when you look back afterwards, I think it generally would be managed better. So, jumping in, now we're going to look at literally the step-by-step guide of how you can build your mass notification service. So there are three things that you need. I'm not going to say the tools necessarily at this point. There are three things that you need to be able to build this. You need a contact list. You need a tool to be able to send voice or SMS messages, or it could be any other message, which we'll come to later on. And then you need something that connects those two. Now, of these three sets of tools, I would wager that probably everyone on this webinar knows one of them, maybe know one of the tools, and perhaps doesn't know the last of the tools. So everyone knows Excel or Google Sheets, I would certainly hope. I would hope probably a good chunk of people have heard of Zapier. It rhymes with happier. And what that is it's a tool that lets you connect different web apps, and it lets you trigger an action and then trigger something in one application and do an action in another application. If you're not aware of Zapier, you may be aware of a consumer tool that does something very similar called If This Then That. So if something happens in one application, something else then occurs in another. And then finally, the tool that sends the communication is Twilio. So I would be surprised if too many people had heard of this. It's a relatively big company, but if you're not working in this particular space, it might be new to you. Used by some really big companies, so the likes of Airbnb, Netflix, Uber, although I think Uber are starting to stop using it at the moment, and it lets you programmatically through an API send and receive messages and voice calls. So those are the three tools we're starting with. Let's start with the contact list. So the first thing that you need to do is create your spreadsheet. So important thing here, give the spreadsheet a very sensible name. Now I must add here, although you can be using any form of Excel, where this spreadsheet needs to be saved, it must be saved on OneDrive for Business, or if we're talking about G Suites, it must be saved in Google Drive, and that is so that Zapier can connect to it to be able to make this connection. We don't have to use a spreadsheet for the contact list. We can use some other tools. We'll get to that a little later. But this is the method for now. So it's important that, number one, where it is saved and the file path is sensible, so that the folder structure is well named. And then two, the file and the individual tabs are well named. So create your spreadsheet, and here we have the current tab we're looking at. This is company-wide notification. So the aim of this tab is this is where we'll be putting our users' information to send the SMS or voice message to them. Pop in your own details. Here we've got test and test. When we get in second, we will need to have some real details in there in order for Zapier and Twilio to be able to run the first test to make sure that it's successful. Next, create any subgroups that you might need to communicate with. So if we go back a stage, the company-wide notification is the notification you will be sending to absolutely everyone. Then any subgroups that might need a different message or message at a different frequency. And in this case, we've got SMT and we have EMT, so our senior management team and our emergency management team. And this could be the senior management of the business who need to have a certain set of instructions or be notified about certain changes. And then your emergency management team could be the people who are doing the work on the ground. Alternatively, you could have this as a group for IT, for instance, if they need some specific instructions. And equally, you could actually take this wider. You could say create some tabs here for customers, for suppliers, for any other groups that you want to communicate with. So the last step in terms of tabs here for contacts is then it's important to create one big full list. Now this isn't a list that we'll be sending messages from in this tab. This is the full list of all of the contacts that we want to include. So here you can see I've included the name, the job title, the mobile phone number, and then any additional detail we might need to know about which groups we want to push them into. So if they're part of particular teams or if they're part of particular groups or functions. So when we have a disaster and we need to move those contacts across to create a new row, and it's the creation of the new row which will trigger the contact, then we know exactly who needs to be pushed into which section. And then the final thing that we're going to do in the spreadsheet itself, and this doesn't have to occur in the spreadsheet, but I think it's a really good idea to minimize the number of places that you need to go to in a disaster. So this is a place to store any pre-prepared messages that you might want to use in a disaster. So look through your risk register, look for any particular incidents that are highly likely to occur, and then create some incident types based on some impact that are likely to cover a lot of those different types of incidents. So here we've got being unable to access the office, your IT systems are down, or there may be any transport problems. So create a handful of these, and it's a good idea to do this so that you can test both the wording. I mean, one thing that's really important here, these are very short messages because we're aiming to use them over either SMS or a voice call. So we want to make sure there's absolutely zero ambiguity in any of the messaging. And then number two, we want to make sure that they are easily understood if you're receiving it, again, either over an SMS or this will be a recorded message, and the technology that's doing this is voice to text technology. So this is a computer that's going to read the message. So for instance here, and actually this is an example of something you shouldn't do, if you want to use the term IT and you want to use that with a voice call, you need to spell that out, I space T. If not, it's going to be read out as it. So worthwhile adding a few of these. You can alter them later. You should alter them to make sure that they're appropriate to whatever the incident is. But yeah, pop in as many as is possible limit how much work you're going to do a little later on. Next, we want to move from our contact list to how we're going to send the message, and that's with Twilio. Now, this one's really, really easy. You simply go to twilio.com, set up your account. You'll need to add some credit here. So this is a chargeable product. It isn't a lot of money, so you need a UK phone number, and that's going to cost you $1 per month. And then you'll need enough credit to pay for as many messages as you're going to send, and that's charged at 4 cents per SMS message or 4 cents per minute for any voice calls. So I'd suggest add as much credit as you'll need to do any testing, and then you can build that on, add more later on should you need it. Twilio is really, really highly featured. I've got this screenshot here so you can see just what's going on. There's a lot you can do with it, but the positive we have here in this situation is that actually all of the features that we're going to use we can access through Zapier. So I'm going to move on from this. We don't really need to do much more other than create the account and add the credit to it. So next stage, do exactly the same thing with Zapier. So we log in, create a free account. At this stage, we don't have to add any credit or pay for a paid account. The free account will give you 5 zaps per month and 100 tasks. Now, a zap is a single integration, so it's a single action trigger occurring somewhere and then a single action occurring somewhere else. And the number of tasks, that relates to the number of times something will be sent. So if we need to send a message to 100 people, that's 100 tasks. Now, this is really as simple as it is. It's a case of you can follow this through, and it's pretty straightforward. We choose our first trigger and we say, right, we want this to be triggered by the set of a new Excel row. So as you can see here in the middle, we have, in this particular screenshot, we can see what the name of the file is and what the name of the folder structure is for the particular spreadsheet we want to add. So the stage that comes before this is Zapier will ask for access to your OneDrive for Business account. So you just need to enable that. It will then pull all that information in automatically. You simply select the file that you need, and then you select what that action is. And in this case, it is creation of a new row. The next step, again, we follow a similar process. So we select an action, and in this case, it's an action that's being carried out by Twilio. So we have the choice here. We can either call a phone or we can send an SMS text. So this is, I guess, an important point here. We can do both of those things. We can set up from the same action, so from adding that same row in the spreadsheet, we can have a call and an SMS put in, but that does count for 2 of the separate zaps. So we need to create those individually. The next stage is simply, again, so Twilio will ask for our credentials, we'll log in, we can provide that access, and then it will automatically pull that information across. We've got a from number here, so that's the number that we've created in Twilio, and then we simply pull in the information that we need from Excel. So in this case, we want to choose where is the mobile phone number that we're using, and the mobile phone number is a particular column, so we just pick that column, nice and easy. We then choose the message that we want to use. Now the message, you can pull that in automatically from Excel, but I've chosen not to do that here. I want to make it a little easier for us to follow. And then importantly here, if you have a message that is over 140 characters long and you're choosing to send by SMS, you have to say yes, you do want to split that message. If not, you will only send the first 140 characters of that message. Now this does obviously incur an additional cost. If you're sending 2 lots worth of text messages, you have to factor in the fact that's two SMS message costs per person. And that's it. So we then get to the stage, we give our Zap a name. So we give it a sensible name. If we're using this for SMS or for call, you'd want to include that here on the name so it's easy to find that one. And we simply turn it on. Now here, and I'm going to get to in just a second, you'll notice while on, this Zap will automatically check your Excel updated row every 15 minutes. So in limitations, in a second, we'll go through that. But I just want to run through quickly what the process is then of how you would send out these messages in a disaster. So first stage is obviously you've suffered some kind of disaster. You've got a fire on all your servers here, so you put that fire out. You would open your spreadsheet, you'd find your pre-prepared statement, adjust that for whatever is appropriate at the time, add that statement into Zapier, go back to Excel, and then copy the contacts into the correct tab for who you want to send those to. The messages will be sent, and all of your users will be notified. So it's really, really nice and simple here. Now, I did mention this is obviously as simple an emergency notification or mass notification service as you could possibly set up. This is really aimed for very small businesses, so there's some limitations here, but at all of these stages, there's opportunities for us to be able to do more and do better with it. So firstly, if you're using the Zapier free package, those packages are subject to change. That can always be amended in future. They may change the number of zaps or the number of tasks that are going on. Currently, it updates every 15 minutes. That may be too long for you to wait before those notifications are sent out. If so, you can use a paid plan. That'll reduce it to 5 minutes. It'll increase your number of zaps from 5. You can increase that upwards, and it'll increase your number of tasks from 100 per month. Now that one is important. You only need to be a relatively medium-sized business for 100 tasks per month to just be insufficient. If you're expecting to send more than one notification message in a month, if you've had a disaster and you expect to have to communicate throughout, then 100 will probably not be sufficient. And then a final point here is that auto replay of those tasks isn't included. So if for whatever reason there's any problem with any of the APIs, those tasks won't try to send again, so it will fail and it just won't send. And that does happen with some of these services. So again, it's a good feature to want to include. So that's our basic, but where can we take it from here? And there's a couple of places. So particularly if we're looking at two of the tools that we're using. First of all, you can increase the number of things that you can connect to using Zapier. So you could, instead of using a spreadsheet, a simple spreadsheet, you could connect that to a different contact list, so perhaps an internal CRM. And then in terms of the messages that it's sending out, you could also fire off a webhook to a different web service that you might be using. If you're using Slack, you could put individual messages in there to notify people. And although we've said, obviously, email addresses aren't necessarily the best method to notify of something that needs immediate response from, undoubtedly you'll have personal email addresses for all staff on file, so you could also add an email address that could be sent to that address. And then on the other side, this is, I guess, all of these steps so far have been on the basis of not having any development expertise to be able to create these products. So if you have development expertise internally, there's a vast number of other things you can do. So you can connect to that Twilio API with any internal applications. Now this is something that that we do here internally at Data Barracks. We have an internal service desk system, and we connect that to Twilio, because if there is an incident somewhere and we need to notify all of our clients, we can do it by different locations or different types of services. It doesn't take an enormous amount of work. It's built for developers to be able to use that functionality easily. So if you do have access to that, you can get to some of those stages of kind of more advanced functionality relatively easily, certainly far more easily now than was the case only a few years ago. So to summarize, think about what good communication means to you as a business, and that needs to be relevant and consistent throughout, and it needs to be a channel that's going to be easily received and checked immediately for all of your users. Think about pre-preparing all of these messages that you might need, and then ultimately, as we said, build a solution that is fit for your business. I think this would work. I think you could probably, when we worked out how long and how much this would cost, you can set up exactly this for less than £50, and I expect it would take you probably not a great deal longer than it's taken me to run through this webinar today. So within an hour of time, without any additional developers, you could have this up and running. But if you're a bigger business and you need some things that are a little more significant, then obviously start with your mass notification strategy and then build that tool that works for you.